The moment I got off the elevator, I remember thinking, like, don't look shocked. Don't look shocked. Because if you look shocked, you will let everybody in this room know that you've never seen this before. And then they will know. Then they will think maybe that you don't belong here.
On today's episode of Why Not Me, my guest is the actress, the writer, the director. Maybe you know her as Olivia Pope, but we all know her as Kerry Washington. So excited to share this conversation with you. We talk about growing up in New York, her pursuit of the arts. What was it like being an only child growing up in New York City with her incredible parents, but going to an all-white private school? What was it like after Scandal ended? And what was her journey looking like then? So many wonderful things we discuss. I'm so excited to share this conversation with all of you. So stay tuned for Kerry Washington on the Why Not Me podcast with Mike Jackson. So, January 31st. I will not say the year because I know not to tell a woman's age.
Oh, you can say 1977.
1977, the Bronx, New York.
The Boogie Down.
The Boogie Down. So, I love Thicker Than Water, your book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for reading it. That means so much to me.
Did
you listen or did you read?
I listened.
But I actually think that's cool because I read it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's even like, sometimes I feel like people who listen to it got even more of an intimate experience of it because it's my voice.
1,000%. Yeah. I was like hanging out with Kerry for like a fucking week. You know what I mean? My car rides, at the crib, like, and you know, I've always liked you. Every time we've communicated, we've had really good conversations, whether it's one-on-one and in groups. But I always felt like, God, I know we have some shit in common. I know there's like similarities to our journey. And reading your book really shone a light on that. You know, I'm also an only child like you.
You are?
Yeah. And the whole, we'll get into it. Okay. So January 31st, you're born, your parents, you know, tell me like your parents' name, tell me a little about that like environment that you were born into, and we'll just go from there.
So my parents are Earl Washington and Valerie Washington. She was born Valerie Patricia Moss, but has become Dr. Valerie Washington. And I was a very, very wanted child. My parents really struggled with fertility, and tried for many, many years to have a child. And eventually, although I did not know it until I was 40, eventually they wound up utilizing the help of a sperm donor. And that was how they conceived. And so when I was born, I think, you know, in a lot of ways, I was like an answer to their prayers. And I felt that, like, I felt that, like, that I was wanted. I felt like the blessing of that and the pressure of that. And, you know, back then in the 70s, it's not like today. Like, you and I have tons of friends today who have kids via sperm donors. And
for sure,
there's like, it's, you know, you go in and there's a binder and you pick, you know, what college they went to. And it's a very like evolved experience. But this was like the wild, wild west. People weren't talking about it back then. There were only a couple of doctors in New York City who were doing it, and very secretly. And, you know, the advice was go ahead and, you know, receive this sperm and then go home and have sex. And then, first of all, that like helps conceive.
It's a little mystery behind it, right?
But also, you have plausible deniability. Like, that kid's your kid and nobody will ever know the difference.
Which your dad kind of leaned into that notion, which we'll get into. Yeah. So.
And nobody knew that there would be a 23andMe or that there would be a such thing as DNA testing. Or so they really were like, this is our secret to keep and nobody ever needs to know. It is what it is. And this is our story. This is who we are. And so that's how I was raised. Yeah. And, you know, a lot of what I write about in Thicker Than Water is the journey of that discovery, but also the reality that my dad is my dad. Like, it doesn't matter who that DNA comes from. It does matter. It matters to like me understanding more layers of who I am, but it doesn't change my relationship with my dad. He's still my dad.
He raised you. He loved you. He did all those things.
He's still loving me and raising me. And, you know.
By the way, it's a blessing that your parents are still here.
I know.
For me, my parents couldn't conceive as well.
You're
Um,
kidding.
4 miscarriages before me,
Oh
3
my
after
God.
me. When they were
Wow.
pregnant with me, after they were told that they couldn't have children, they didn't believe that they would make it through term.
Mm.
So when I was born, they kind of referred to me as their miracle baby. And, similarly,
Oh,
I felt that love, like they wanted me so badly, that it kind of defined our relationship. You know what I mean? Like throughout my journey, it was like always about me. You know what I mean?
mm.
And I'm wondering if you felt that. Like, did you ever feel added pressure being the one and only child to like not only live your truth, but also like represent them along the way and all that stuff?
100%. I mean, first, I want to ask you a question. When did you learn about your parents' fertility journey? Did you know your whole childhood? How old were you when you learned that?
Probably like middle school, going into high school. I'd say like
Ah,
14, 15. I kind of learned
uh-huh.
that. And it wasn't even like that it was a big secret so much
Yeah,
as
it
like
just was
probably
like, because
just,
you were age appropriate by that
yeah,
time
that
to
part.
yeah,
Kind
yeah.
of digging a little deeper. Um, and then there's that extra pressure of like, we both went to really ritzy private white schools, you and I.
Mm-hmm,
There's
mm-hmm,
that you went to Spence, I went to a school called Friend Central in Philadelphia. So there's also that pressure of like,
mm, mm.
not only are you our only hope, but we busted our ass to
For
put you
every
here.
opportunity. That's
Right.
right. That's right. That's right.
So that's all they really need to say. They don't have to say, don't fuck it up because you're already feeling it.
Yeah,
You know
you
what I
know
mean?
that that's the takeaway.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And you
definitely.
also know what you have and don't have when you're around all the people that have everything.
Mm,
Right. So
hmm.
you're already acutely aware of, I don't want to say the word deficiencies because that seems harsh, but you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah, yeah.
it just felt a little different. I don't mean to cut you off.
No, no, no. My friend Jay Shetty talks about it as like our parents give us gifts and they give us gaps.
Yes.
And you become more and more aware of what the gifts are and what the gaps are, I think, as you travel through life. But I'm amazed at all these parallels. I
There's
didn't
more
know it's
coming.
that's so amazing because I do think there is something about the only child experience and the challenged fertility that adds a pressure to be the best and to like make sure that all their hopes and dreams were not for naught.
Yeah, for
Right, that
sure.
you're living up to. If we are prayers answered, then I want to be a good answer. I want to make sure that I'm living up to those prayers wholly.
For
um
a thousand
yeah.
percent. And it's also, you just feel it. It's like unspoken in a lot of ways. Like you just, by the way they raise you and how they nurture you and like some of the things that they say that aren't intentionally meant to, put pressure on you, but you just,
Hmm.
the more you learn your family and your parents and your journey as a family and you just feel it, you know?
Yeah.
It's a
But
burden in a lot
these
of
are
ways.
high quality problems, right? It is a burden, but also like I think the challenge of that pressure is much, I don't want to say easier, but I'm grateful that my the journey that I'm walking through is not one of neglect, right?
Yes.
And that's not to minimize the trauma or the pressure, but just to say like we also were so lucky. We were
Yes, that
so
part.
blessed to be so wanted, to have such high expectations of us, um, to be so loved. And
Yeah.
for me, I feel like part of my journey in having compassion for the choices that my parents made to not tell me, for example, um, is like I know it came from love. I know that my parents weren't like sitting in a dark room being like, like let's figure out how to screw up a child. Like
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
figure out how to make a child feel unsafe and unsure of her surroundings. Like that was
Yeah.
not the intent. The intent was actually the opposite, right? To make me feel supported and loved and that I belong. They didn't want me to
Hmm.
feel different. They didn't want
Hmm.
me to feel less than. And so they made these choices to keep my biology from me, but also, as you mentioned, to like have high hopes and high expectations, and um, to expect excellence from me. And even though there's work for me to do around like shaking off some of that feeling that I have to do more in order to deserve
Yeah.
love or
Yeah.
in order to belong, I'm still grateful for how much they've taught me to hustle, how much they've taught me. Like, I know there's so much about my ambition and my level of success, my achievement that comes from the gifts of what they gave me. And then there are the gaps, and we that's what adulting is. Like, you figure out the gaps, you do the work to
1,000%.
like reparent where they couldn't, because
Yeah.
nobody's perfect. You know, our kids are going to be in some conversation having the same sentiment. As much as I'm trying to do everything right, I know that I'm giving them gifts, and I know that I'm giving them gaps, and
I'm
that's
giving lots of gaps. I already
right.
know.
And
And
that's
by the way, it's
part
not
of
an
the
indictment on our parents or on
yeah.
us. You know what I mean? It's just no one's perfect. We're all imperfect humans, and we bring our best to the table. I think, I have a 3-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old,
Ooh,
and
you are in
and
it.
whoo, say less. I've been up since 4 this morning. And that's on par. Um,
Yeah.
but we're always just doing the best we can. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we, my dad had 2 other children that I didn't know about by 2 different women.
Really?
So I have 2 older sisters.
Oh,
Um,
wow. And
and I'll never get the answers to that.
when did you find that out?
I heard rumblings of it when I was younger, but not much. But it wasn't until ancestry.com, you know what I'm saying? And like, you know,
Wow.
and then my parents are gone, but I went and talked to one of my cousins on my dad's side and started asking her a bunch of questions. And she was like, yeah, we know Robin and we
Mm,
know so-and-so. And one like became a doctor and the other one is like a gangster. You know what I mean? Like legit.
mm,
And
mm,
again, that goes back to environment too, right? Like
mm,
who raised you, how you raised, all that good
mm,
stuff. But anyway, um, that's
mm.
life.
Yeah, I'm really struck by I think one of the most profound experiences of writing Thicker Than Water and putting it into the world was I thought my family was so unique. Like, I thought, oh my God, this secret that my parents have kept from me, and like, this story is so. And then the book comes out in the world, and I'm on tour in all these cities, and every person at every stop on the tour just wants to tell me their family secret.
Yep.
Like, because we all have
We
them.
all got them.
No family's immune. And
No,
they're all different kinds of secrets, because also I tell like more than one secret in the book. But then people just we all have stuff, and I
we all have
really
our
do
stuff.
believe we are as sick as our secrets. Like, there's so much freedom in getting to live in truth and have the truth. And I don't know. I don't know if this was your experience, but I felt like learning the truth helped me learn to trust myself again, because like you talk
Mm,
about, there's like these inklings or whispers or spidey sense, like whatever you want to call it. But when you don't get to assign those intuitive gut feelings to a truth, you just feel crazy. Or I
yeah,
did. I
they're
just felt
trapped
like
in
I'm
them.
insane. Yeah. So
Yeah,
having the truth is so liberating and empowering. And I hope that that's what more and more people are willing to embrace, you know?
agreed. I'm learning more and more about living in my truth and releasing myself from the anxieties that you hold in. And I think for me, again, it's really about being a father. I'm 52 doing this shit for the first time. So I've lived a
Mm.
whole life that was
Mm-hmm.
really just about myself, right? My mom, but really just
Mm.
about me. And I was really not accountable to anyone but myself. So I feel like the pains that I felt then weren't massive hurdles for me. I didn't think they were massive hurdles for me because I didn't have to really deal
Mm.
with a lot of things to live my life because I was only accountable to myself.
Mm.
But now that I am
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
accountable to my babies and to my wife, that like core family that I've built, my purpose is different. How I present and move myself in the world has to be different.
Mm.
And that's when I really started realizing, oh shit, man, like you got some stuff you have to deal with, and therapy's been great. I'm a big proponent of therapy
Same.
because you want to be your best self, and you're never going to be perfect, but you want to be as best as you can, and maybe the gaps be a little bit less for your kids than they
Yeah.
are for you.
Yeah, right. If you had told me, or like maybe my kids will have more tools to deal with their gaps, If you had told that little girl in the Bronx growing up on Pugsley Avenue that I would be in therapy with my parents and that
Right.
I would have the kind of intimacy that I have and like honesty, transparency, truth that I have with my parents now, I don't think she would have believed us.
Yeah, I'm
That
jealous,
seemed
Kerry.
so far from our family culture growing up.
But what a gift. I don't know what I would do to have that opportunity to sit in a room with my mother and father and talk through all of our stuff, and there's still so many unanswered questions that I'm trying to figure out as I'm parenting. Right. So,
Yeah.
I know you appreciate it, but that is such a beautiful gift that you get to do with your parents to kind of unpack all that
Mm.
stuff. So good for you and that opportunity. All right. Back to New York, back to your youth.
Okay. Okay.
um, So I think you started acting, but your mom was very much an educator and she created like these programs for Black teachers and like you were
Yeah.
like a fixture in her classroom. You were answering
Yes.
questions at a young age. Like, did that like
Yes.
kind of, even just answering questions in the classroom, like did that kind of fuel like the performative juices in your body, you think? Just speaking out loud at a young age where that could have been intimidating, but like you were put in the situation? I don't know.
Maybe. I think it did feed into my agency as a thinking person. Like I've never been afraid in a classroom. And I think that's because, and I've never been afraid to not know something. And
Right.
I think that's because my mom was a teacher and an educator, and I understood that there's power in not knowing because then you get to learn. Although I used to have anxiety attacks when I had to do math because I was so intimidated by math. But maybe in like in the social sciences, I've never felt intimidated by a
Right.
classroom. Um, and but my mom, because she's an educator and also because she is a very stoic, very level, she's emotionally very level and calm and graceful. And um, she had this kid, me, who was like a walking id, like just nonstop feelings and super verbal and super expressive. And she was like, what do I do
What?
with this child? And to her credit, I think because she's an educator, she was like, I don't know what to do with all these feelings, but I'm going to put you in a place where that is appropriate. And so it was like the children's theater company and the school plays and she was just always presenting me with options where I could be expressive. Um, and it really helped me. It really helped me because I think I wouldn't have known how to articulate it at a young age, but I knew that there wasn't enough room in our little two-bedroom apartment in the Bronx for all of my feelings. Like I knew that.
Did you
And
live in that same apartment in your whole high school
my
career?
whole life,
Wow.
I just got my parents out of that apartment like 2 years ago.
Wow. By the
I
way,
was like, at this point, people think I don't love you. Like the fact that you don't leave this, they're like, Carrie's not buying you a house. Like, what? Why are you here? You guys got to move just for the brand. Like, you're making me look like
the
I'm
optics are
struggling with the
off right now,
bills.
Mom. Let's
Yeah,
go.
like what's happening? So, but my parents are real New Yorkers. They are like through and through New Yorkers, um, and lucky
Love
for
that.
me, they got stuck here during COVID. They were in Los Angeles with me when COVID started, which is incredible. And so they were here. And then really just recently, I've moved them out of the Bronx into the city. Um,
Oh, you got them a
but
place
they're
in New York.
yes, yes. And they
Okay.
have a
All right.
place. They live with us in LA and in New York they have a place. Yeah. Because they
Uh,
summer in New York.
Oh, I see. They fancy, huh?
There, they summer. I was like, you can't summer in the Bronx. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Second thing we have in common is my mom also is an educator.
You're kidding. Oh my
She
God.
taught for 40 years,
Wow.
third grade. and would have benefited tremendously from someone like your mother and her women's groups for teachers for Black teachers. Like that would have been something that would have
Yeah.
been exceptionally beneficial for my mom. So
Yeah. Yeah.
how does Spence happen? And
Hmm.
the second part to that question is reading the book, knowing your dad. It was really interesting when you said something about your dad, because it made me think of my dad, which is the perception of being wealthy versus the reality of being wealthy.
Yes.
My dad was big on that. So my question is, the second part of it, we'll talk about Spence, but then once we get into that, the second part is, was there ever any like shame or embarrassment about being in the 2-bedroom place in the Bronx when you're
Mm-hmm.
living amongst wealth every day? Like, did you have friends come over, or did you only go to their crib? Like,
Yeah. That's such a good question. So Spence happened because I think reluctantly, because my mom had been an educator in the public school system and then was training teachers to teach mostly in the public school system. But when I was graduating from sixth grade, she just felt like I needed to be challenged academically more. And I remember her
right,
talking about how, like, I went to this school in the North Bronx where all the kids were Italian American. Like, their grandparents had come. A lot of them spoke Italian at home with their grandparents or were listening, hearing Italian at home. And when the sixth grade graduation rolls around and they're giving out awards, I got the Italian language award, and my mother was like, "I'm done. Like, you
that's
need,
a wrap.
like, you should not be winning the Italian. Like, no, we have to put you in an environment where you are a smaller fish in a bigger pond because I
Right.
want you to be stretched more." And so we like interviewed at all the fancy New York independent schools. And I think it was a combination of Spence offered me the biggest financial aid. And I also really liked it. Like I liked the environment of being with all girls. That was really empowering to me. I
Mm-hmm.
felt safe. Um, so I wound up going to Spence on scholarship and commuting from the Bronx, my beloved Bronx, every day, on the number six train, Jennifer Lopez's number six.
Yep. Final
Um,
six.
uh-huh. And I remember when I first started going there, my mom told me I had to get off at 86th Street because it was a safer neighborhood than getting off at 96th. Even though Spence was right in the middle.
Right.
And, yeah, it was exposure for me to a different world. Like we were rich in the Bronx because we had two cars and my parents had a cabin in upstate New York and we had a microwave and a dishwasher before anybody else in the building. So we were
Right.
rich. That
Yeah.
was rich.
Right.
And then
Right.
I went to Spence and people didn't have like a cabin in upstate New York. They had like a helipad in the Hamptons
Right.
and like they didn't have two cars. They had six cars across two continents and um, it was just an entirely different stratosphere. The thing I remember distinctly was, growing up in the Bronx, I would go in my elevator at Pugsley Avenue and go up to the 12th floor and the elevator doors open and you could walk to the right and there were like, I don't know, 7 apartments on that side, or you could go to the left where we were on that side and there were like another, I don't know, 5 to 7 apartments on that side. And our apartment was all the way at the very end of the hall. And that was my experience of like what it means to live in an apartment building. And then I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to my first event at somebody's house at Spence, and I got in the elevator. And first of all, there was a man there to push the elevator buttons. So I was like, I
Right.
didn't do that myself. Like, what's that about? The guy pushes the button, and the doors open, and that is the apartment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the building was just as big as the one that I lived on that had 12 to 14 apartments on
Right.
the floor, but it was just one apartment. And I was like, nobody else lives here. And she was like, well, me and my brother, and my sister, and, the housekeeper, maid, nanny person who also had quarters. And it just was, I remember being flooded with shame, like you talked about. Like
Yeah.
it felt weird. I don't know why I took on the shame of not knowing that people lived like that, but I felt like it was somehow, I felt shame about my ignorance, kind of like, how did I not
Interesting.
know
Okay.
that people lived like this? And also, why? why doesn't anybody in the Bronx live like this? And
Right.
how come I've never seen anybody that looks like me that lives like this? And I had so many questions. And those questions, unlike sitting in like history or English class, those questions felt like not okay to ask because I would be outing myself, not as somebody who just didn't have information, but as somebody who didn't have culture or didn't have
Yeah. That's
cultural
interesting.
fluency. Um, and as somebody who didn't have affluence. Like if I didn't, I had to, in the moment I got off the elevator, I remember thinking like, don't look shocked. Don't look shocked. Because if you look shocked, you will let everybody in this room know that you've never seen this before. And
Yeah.
then they will know, then they will think maybe that you don't belong here. Um,
So act rich, feel rich, kind of, right?
yeah. And
You
I
know,
was like 12. You know what I mean?
that's
Like
real though. It's fucking real.
navigating, it was so crazy to have to be kind of managing my presentation of self and my cultural um, capacity at such a young age. But I just knew instinctively, you know.
Yeah, I remember for us, when I first started at the private school in first grade, we lived
Oh, you
in,
were young.
oh, I was a lifer. We were there, living in this place called Winfield outside of Philly, which is essentially West Philly.
Yeah.
And, my parents, like your parents, were working really hard, trying to provide the best life. What they ended up doing was buying a house in like this very affluent suburb.
Huh.
But we were like, I don't know how they bought it. I don't know how
Mm-hmm.
but they got it. But
Mm-hmm.
we're definitely like the poorest family on the block and the
And were
second
you the
black
only
family.
black family? Ah, second. Okay.
So here's the story. I think I told this once before, but the short version is the first family, the Moseses, moved in
Uh-huh.
maybe 12 years before us.
Huh.
At the time they put an offering on the house, all the other white neighbors pulled their money to outbid the Moses family. The homeowner was so appalled by his neighbors and friends that they would do something like that. He still accepted the Moses' offer and they moved into the house. The neighbors loved the Moseses. They loved their one black son, Ricky. He went to the private school that I actually went to. So when the Jacksons came rolling around, instead of trying to outbid or all that stuff, they just threw a welcome to the neighborhood party.
Wow.
But the funny story was they kept like, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Like, how the fuck are you here?
Ah.
Basically. So
Uh-huh.
at the end,
Uh-huh.
my
Uh-huh.
dad did the fork to the glass thing. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like 6, 7, and hey, I want to thank everyone for throwing us this lovely party and welcoming us to this neighborhood. A lot of you have asked me, what I do. And I just wanted to answer everyone at once. And my dad, by the way, he's from the hood. And he's like, I'm a pimp and this is my hoe.
No. No.
Yes. Yes, he did. And we drove a
Wait,
Cadillac at the time, by the way.
but wait, what was the truth? Was that the truth or was he
No,
messing with
no, my dad was
people?
an
What
engineer
did
and my
he
mom was a
do?
school teacher. Yeah, exactly. He was like fucking with the white folks.
I'm like, how was your mom turning tricks and teaching third grade?
Hey, everyone's got their journey, Kerry. Everyone's got their journey.
Like, that's kind of dope. Until parent teacher night when she's like, "Oh, Mr."
Excuse me. I know you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And what was the reaction in the room?
I don't fully remember it because I was still kind of
Yeah.
young, but I remember my
Yeah.
parents saying my dad was like, they were silent. And he could have let that silence hold for a while, but he's like, I'm just
Uh-huh.
kidding. You know what I mean? Maybe like 5,
Uh-huh.
6 seconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just about how do you fit in? Like you have to gel, right? You have to be a part of the community.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
goal. And, it's just always different when you're one of one or one of two in a vast body of humans to kind of keep your identity while trying to assimilate and figure out how to best move forward with all these other people around you.
Yeah, I got really lucky because for some reason, the year that I arrived at Spence, and I don't know the story of why this happened, but somebody decided to do some experiment. And usually in all the years before our class, and mostly for most of the years after our class, there's like, as you mentioned, maybe one, two, three Black students, maybe five, six students of
Yeah.
color in total, right?
Out of like 30 people.
Right,
Right.
out of 42
Right.
girls,
40.
I think my graduating class had 40. So my year, there were like 10 of us. it was nuts. And I'm talking
That's
combined Black and Latina,
okay. Okay.
but still,
That's a
it
lot. That's out
was
of 40. That's like a
it
quarter of
was
the class. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That would never
And
happen in my private school.
some of us were from the outer boroughs, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, but some were like biracial kids from the Upper West Side. Like there was so it was really interesting. Like from a young age, it was still we knew that this environment was not necessarily built for us or ready for us, and that we were not the norm for what the school had been. We weren't the normal Spence girl throughout
Sure.
its history, um, over 100 years. But we had each other in a way that was very liberating. And I think that's one of the reasons why we got through. Like, I know a lot of kids who've had this experience that you and I have had that are so emotionally damaged from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but we had each other in a really unique way. And I think I think in many ways I survived and was actually able to thrive in that environment because there were so many of us, because none of us felt the need to be everything. Like in a
Right.
way, we were each allowed to pursue our individual journeys because not one of us had to be like the perfect jock or the perfect artist or like we didn't, like, none of us had to be Paul Robeson, right? Like we didn't have to be all
Right.
the things to everybody. um
It's like the
I
perfect
could be,
compliment.
yeah, I could be
You
the
know?
weird theater kid who, like,
Right.
at lunch all the black kids sat together, but we also belonged to different communities at the same time, which was a real gift because I think it allowed us to step into ourselves more because we weren't just the black girl in class. We were able to be more because we had each other, because we had community.
I love that. But how is like dating in that environment? Because I know for me, like being the one or two or three black dudes growing up in the 80s, also my area was predominantly Jewish, which,
Mm.
Jewish, like you're always hearing like, we got to stick together and blah, blah, which is great.
Yeah, yeah,
No
yeah.
shade. Um,
Yeah.
so you always felt like an outlier when it came to those things. Did you ever
Mm.
feel that being like, well, you had like other black people, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting. I felt it even in elementary school because I got our when I was in, I don't know, it was around second grade or so, I can't remember, but they moved the Talented and Gifted program from the neighborhood I was in the Bronx to this all Italian American neighborhood in the North Bronx. And
Right.
so that the Black and Latino kids were bused, but the white kids didn't have to be bused because it was in their neighborhood.
Right.
And that was the first place that I started to feel othered. And I remember Valentine's Day. I remember feeling like, I don't know if any of these boys in this class will like me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, by the time I got to Spence, I think I kind of knew. I mean, luckily, I had a pretty robust life outside of school because of theater.
Right.
And so I had a little bit more like like an expanded social space. But I also had a lot of white boyfriends growing up. Like the first love of my life was a white kid who went to one of the other private schools. Actually, got kicked out of one of the other private schools. Um,
Do you know what
but
happened
went
to
to
him?
another. What? Yeah, I feel like I don't know if I could. It's like his story, not mine.
You don't have to say his
But
name, but like,
he,
yeah.
he was amazing. You know what? I in my mind, I think it may have been drug related,
Oh,
or behavioral related. I'm not sure, but he was definitely like a super dope, cool white kid. Um, and that was my first love. And I was with him for a long time. Like even when I went to college, we were still together.
oh, wow.
So
Okay.
at the beginning. But yeah, I think, I think I learned I learned to find my way. Um, I think New York City lends itself to a little bit
Yeah.
more fluidity around this kind of stuff, but yeah, I mean, I remember one day at dinner, my dad joking around about like, that I couldn't date a white boy, and I remember thinking what else am I gonna date? Like, you put me in these environments, like, what's your
I
what's your
feel the same way.
expectation?
My prom date
Yeah.
my senior year was a white girl, and until it wasn't, because my parents had people at the crib, and they were like, "You better not take that white girl." And I literally had to break my prom date and find the random
Oh.
black girl from my school and bring her to my prom.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But see, what's crazy is like similar, not unlike your street in the neighborhood you grew up in, where like everybody was afraid of this family, but once they got to know this family, they loved this family. It was the same with my boyfriends. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would bring the boyfriend home and my dad. I think my dad at first may have struggled with the idea that like your daughter's supposed to want to be with somebody like you, right? And
Right.
so maybe it felt like a rejection. I'm definitely like hypothesizing and putting words in his mouth, but maybe that's what was going on. But as soon as my dad would get to know this guy, as soon as he got to know him, he was closer to him than I was, right? Like, so like loved him. So, that I think so much of it is about real intimacy in community, and it's interesting because I think a lot about being a parent now and that balance of like wanting to provide an environment where your kids are exposed to everything and everyone, and wanting them to feel proud of who they are and comfortable with who they are, but also know that they can walk into any room and belong, and that
Mm-hmm.
that nobody is the enemy, nobody's not appropriate to be with, that you have to, if somebody proves themselves to not be trustworthy or speaks in ways that are disrespectful to you for any reason, you walk away. That's
Yeah.
not a relationship you need to be in, but that you don't make those decisions just based on identity politics.
Yeah. It's interesting raising biracial kids. I ironically ended up with a tall blonde white wife. After
I
knowing I
did
was
not. I
Polaris.
ended up with a very handsome, tall black man, but
Yeah. I know who you ended up with.
yeah. I was like, when you were talking about Philly neighborhoods, I was like, I think I know that neighborhood because we lived there for a little bit.
Yeah, I remember. Didn't you live in like the chocolate factory? You lived in like Old City. I
We
remember
lived in
talking
Old
about this
City.
once, like
Yeah.
Third and
Yeah.
Race or something. You
We
were
lived
telling me
in,
about
I
that.
don't remember the exact address, but yeah, we lived in Old City, and I loved Philadelphia. Oh my God. I loved that city.
I'm taking my 4-year-old Thursday in 2 days to his first Eagles game.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Flying in, we're gonna do the whole thing, and
In Philly? You're going in Philly?
I'm flying into Philly Thursday. The game's Thursday
Wow.
night. I'm gonna give him
Wow.
a nap, get him a cheesesteak, and tailgate.
Oh.
We're gonna go down to the field, and like our friend's broadcasting the game, so we're gonna go do that
Oh.
whole deal. And then our other friend, and we'll send seats for the first quarter. And then our other friend has a suite. Then
Oh
we'll go up
my
to the
gosh.
suite, so my kid will probably fall asleep, and I can still watch the game. But
Yes, yes. Oh,
but
that's
super
so
excited about
sweet.
that.
Yeah,
So all right, so you do this thing called acting, right? So let's talk
I
about
do.
that a little bit.
Okay.
That's the word on the street. Um, so you did do some acting at Spence, right? Or was it something like
I
Ta-da?
did.
Am I making that up?
I did. I was in a children's theater company called Tada that I auditioned for, and when I was in seventh grade, I did lots of theater at Spence. It's the only time I've ever worked with Gwyneth Paltrow. Was she was a senior when I was in middle school, and we were doing Midsummer Night's Dream. So she was Queen Titania, and the middle schoolers were allowed to audition for the fairies. So that's my only time I've performed on stage with Gwyneth. Um,
Love that.
I know it's so funny, but I fell in love with theater, and again, having that outlet for expression, with Tada. And then I started working with this amazing theater company out of Mount Sinai Hospital, where we used to do these educational shows all around the country, really, it was at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, and we would do these shows around like safer sex issues and teaching kids how to talk about safe sex and homosexuality and drug abuse and self-esteem and losing your virginity, like all that stuff, but through these kind of unresolved skits, where we
Right.
would perform them and then we would stay in character after the show and have the audience kind of role play and help us through our
Oh, that's
issues.
so cool. That's really
Yeah.
cool. So then GW,
Yes.
tell me,
Yes.
like, were you a theater major there? Like, what was that, fully immersed in
So I
acting?
was not. I mean I did this incredible program called Young Arts, which
Hmm.
is an audition based program where if you make it as a finalist to Young Arts, they fly you to Miami for the weekend. And this is in like dance and theater and music and photography and poetry. It's like all these different art forms. But they fly a bunch of 16, 17-year olds down to Miami to spend the weekend and get training and like audition in person. And when you go down to Miami, you immediately get put on a list for all the top colleges, all the top art schools. And so it was kind of amazing. It was kind of like being recruited for
Yeah.
sports, which I didn't know that that happened for artists. You know, the way Namdi got like letters from schools that wanted him to play, like I suddenly was on the list for like conservatories and liberal arts schools that had theater programs. And so my mother was adamant that I was not going to a conservatory. She let me audition for them, but she was like, "You are not going to school for 4 years and graduating, and all you can talk about is what did she say to me? And all the only thing you know how to do is make like a cold cup seem like it's hot." And I was like, "That's not nice. That's not
Yeah.
kind."
That's not
Um,
kind.
but she
That's
was
that's that tough mama
very,
love, man.
yeah, and she was. I think she was terrified of me being a starving artist. You know, she didn't she just didn't she wanted me to do something to have a backup plan, you know, because she
Right.
thought, what are the odds that my daughter actually makes it as an actor? And she was
Fair.
right. It was like me
Yeah.
saying, like, I want to be in the NBA. Like, good
Yeah.
luck, kid,
Yeah.
right?
Good luck with that, buddy. Yeah.
But I wound up, one of the schools that reached out was GW, and they had a theater scholarship where you didn't have to major in acting. So I wasn't graduating with a BFA, I graduated with a BA, and it was a super well rounded liberal arts education. But I had to take at least 3 credits of theater every semester, and I had to audition for every single play, whether I
You
wanted to do
talk
it or
about this in the
not.
book, right? You do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was really amazing for me. It was incredible exposure. I loved living in Washington, which it's so weird because Washington, obviously, because of Scandal, played a big figure in my life. It figures in my life very prominently. But I fell in love with DC. I fell more deeply in love with theater and with like the study, the craft of theater. But I also got to study a lot of other stuff like anthropology and sociology, dramatic lit. And I think those things make me a better actor because I
For
kind of
sure.
approach my work in a somewhat of an academic way before I dive in. So that was
And
kind
you
of
have
how
more to
I
pull
wound up
from,
at
right?
GW.
More information, more
Yeah.
knowledge, just better ways to
Yes.
kind of craft your character and all of that stuff.
Yeah. You know, acting is to figure out who a character is, you have to figure out how they became who they are and then how that gets expressed. And so the how they become who they are is so much psychology, and how that gets
Mhm.
expressed is so much sociology,
Yeah.
and culture. And so I feel like those disciplines really serve me.
And I think people sometimes shortchange the craft of acting. And, it really is, it's an art, and it takes you have to be really professional about it, and really, I think, and really like know your shit, like repetition and like figuring it out and figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. And I think backstory is really important to character development, even if it's not on the page, just to your point, understanding that person and their choices. I think it's
Yeah.
really smart that you do that. A lot of actors I know that we know don't even read fucking scripts. Like they read their fucking scenes, they show up, they deliver their lines, and they're out.
I
And I'm like, that's
know.
such a disservice.
I'm not that
Yo,
girl. I'm the girl who, like, you know, I'm in this new film, 6888, that comes out December 20th on Netflix. Shameless plug.
no,
And
do it.
I played Charity Adams, who was the captain of the only all Black women of color female battalion to go overseas in World War II.
Oh, wow.
And so when I was preparing for this role, she has a memoir that she wrote. And when I was preparing, I read the memoir 2 times, like cover to cover, highlighting, circling, post-it notes. And then I always had it with me, like always on set. I had my script and I had my Charity Adams book, and was like, oh, every night would scour it, would sometimes on days like say like, God, tell me, I'm just going to open the book somewhere and let it inform my work today. Like open it up. Like I just was that, and my trailer was covered in pictures of her.
Wow.
I watched like every interview, listened to interviews she did. Like that's for me, that is where so much of the joy comes in because I feel like I can I can lose myself in her more when I do that kind of research and like immerse myself in her world.
Well, that leads me. So I know other actors that say that sometimes, but your process is you're still in it. You're still in the script work as you're shooting. I know some actors like they do that work going into production and then they like trust, like they just leave it to instinct.
Yes, I do a little bit of both. I do a lot of it going beforehand,
Hmm.
but I like to kind of have the material around me on the day also because it helps me like take risks and surprise myself while still staying anchored, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Especially when I'm playing a real person. There's a different kind of pressure also, which I've done a lot in my career, whether it's like the wife of Ray Charles or Idi Amin's wife, Kay Amin, or even Olivia Pope was heavily inspired by Judy Smith, particularly in
Yeah.
season one. So I've played a lot of characters who are either based on real people or inspired by real people. And so for me, there's like an added responsibility. So I think the research helps me feel like I can take risks and still be anchored in some truth.
Do you ever get like maybe with Anita Hill? Did you get like
Oh, there's another example. Yeah.
obviously the pressure of that, especially when they're alive, is tremendous. Judy as well. Like, what was it? What was the anxiety like with Anita? Like meeting her at first and then
Yeah.
getting her critique afterwards. Like, tell me about that experience.
So Anita Hill gave me one of the greatest compliments I've ever gotten as an actor. I feel like choked up even remembering it. It was she came to set and it was the final moment of the film where I'm walking across campus and she came up to me and she said, I didn't know that I have a walk. And I said, what?
Wow.
She said, I watched you and I saw myself, but I didn't know until this moment that I had a walk because she has a very specific walk. And it was really, because I shot that movie in between two seasons of Scandal and Olivia Pope has such a specific walk, that
Right.
walk was one of the things that I really leaned into to help me differentiate Olivia Pope from Anita Hill. So that was really moving to me when she said that because it was sort of like I taught her something about herself in that moment. And I think that's what we're always trying to do as actors is that I always hope that the audience, whether it's theater or podcast or TV show or movie, that like when the audience sits down, my prayer is that we create something that allows them to see themselves more. Either they see who they want to be, or they see who they don't want to be, or they reckon with some part of their past, or they get moved toward a better version of their future. Like, but it's that like deep human resonance of like, I see myself that I think is the sign of really rich work.
Normally, when I do these interviews, I go kind of chronologically and go from point A to point B. But truthfully, you've done so much. You've done so much, Kerry. Like, so I'm just going to jump around a little bit
Okay.
with some roles and some of that stuff to get some insight into like your experiences, and then we'll go to some other stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm friends with Rock, Chris, and
Yeah.
I love Chris as a human, and
Yeah.
obviously he's a director and all that stuff. Um,
Hmm.
when I saw you, and I think I love my wife, I was like, "Yo, like, what was
It's a
like, what was?"
different version of me.
Yeah, it was. It was. Tell me about
Yeah,
playing like that kind of sexy, like
so,
seductress gal.
it was so funny because when I read the script, I was like, Chris, don't you? I'm more right for the wife, right? Like, I was so confused. And at that point in my career, I had played, a bunch of famous people's wives. So I was like, you want me for the wife, right? And he was like, no, no, no. I want you for this other role. And he just really trusted me. And I was so grateful because I think I really needed to stretch as an actor and allow myself to embrace more of that part of myself, the bad girl, the rule breaker, to allow some more of my sexuality into my work. And I hadn't really felt like I had permission to do that until then. So
Yeah.
I was really, really grateful that he saw the potential in that for me and that he gave me space to do it, you know.
He actually he's a great director. I mean, his
He's a
films
really
are
good
really good.
director.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really good director. I felt very encouraged, and he also just has great taste. Like he's drawn, that film is a version of like a retelling of an old French film that has, similar themes. So I think I'm really lucky that I've been able to work with him a couple of times,
You did
both
play his
in
wife
bat.
once, right?
I did, or well, his
Yeah.
girlfriend, and then we got married at the end of the movie,
Okay. All
in a
right.
movie called Bad Company. And then I Think
Yeah.
I Love My Wife was our second time working together.
Again, in the spirit of jumping around, you probably don't remember this. I came and said hello to you afterwards, but I saw you perform in American Son.
Oh, yeah. I do remember. I was so grateful that you came. It was so hard because at the end of that play, you guys were devastated. I
Yeah.
remember you were
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
moved. Um, but I was so relieved to be done. So everybody would come to my dressing room being like, dead, like just distraught. And I was like, "What's up, guys?"
What's
Like
good?
I
Want
was
a shot?
so
Let's get a drink. Yeah.
exactly.
Got this rosé.
Yeah,
That shit.
exactly.
And that play, those circumstances. Who was the Paul something? Who's
The guy who played my husband, my
Steve
ex-husband,
Pascal? Is that
Steve
his name?
Pasquale.
Like just the
So
performances, the
good.
story, all of it was like
So
so
good.
heavy. It just really shook me. But the other great thing you did was, which is you flexing your muscles. And one of the things that's so impressive about you is not only did you produce that and take it to the stage, but like you also then took it to Netflix.
Yeah. I was so grateful, right? Because those themes of like just how hard it is to parent Black children and
Mm-hmm.
the fears, the implicit fears that get born in you when you are the parent of a Black child, that is a theme that exists all over the world.
Yep.
And I knew that it was such a special play for Broadway, but I also thought this is going to resonate in other places. And Netflix stepped up. We filmed it right after the play closed. It
Mm-hmm.
was beautiful. It was like such a really special experience. And then it's true. Like when we looked at the data, that film overperformed in Paris and in South Africa and in Brazil because these are places, pockets in the world where
Yep.
Black people feel the fear of law enforcement. And so I'm really proud to be able to have and grateful to Netflix that we were able to bring that story to a much, much larger global audience.
Well, I think it also just speaks to the power of like who you are and how people like receive you. Because
Mm.
that little play doesn't get made if it's not for you championing it, right? And I
Mm.
think what you're doing with Simpson Street, your production company, I believe named
Yeah.
after the street your mother grew up on. Is that
Yes, yes,
okay?
thank you. Yeah, that's right. The
Um,
street in the Bronx that my mom grew up on.
um, I just, I think about the stuff you've done. I know some of the stuff you guys are working on through Pilar and it's just like, how do you just feel being in this position where you have this sort of, I don't want to call it a power because none of us have the ultimate power in this business, right? It's hard to get that, but to have this canvas that you get to play on and really push forward narratives that others might not be able to do. Like, do you feel that responsibility? I know for John and I, like, it's like, fuck, we have this opportunity to tell these beautiful brown and Black stories, some tragic, some aspirational, but if not us, then who, right? So I'm wondering if do you kind of feel that same pressure or do you just kind of story drives it and everything else falls in place?
It's funny because as I'm listening to you, I feel like it's not unlike the pressure we felt as kids. This idea of
Mm,
like, you've been blessed, you're here, it's a bit of a miracle. Not a lot of people get to this place. What are you going to do with it? And so, just like when we were kids, it's like, how do we balance that? Like, I know I'm blessed. I don't want to complain. Like, this is a huge blessing and an opportunity. And I just want to step into it and do my
yeah.
best. And for me, a lot of the joy comes from not necessarily what I get to do, but that that I am able to create opportunities for other people to shine. Like when I think about a show like Reasonable Doubt, which
Yeah.
is like Ramla's killing it.
Love
Ramla
Ramallah.
Muhammad, our showrunner,
Yeah.
is
She's
killing
awesome.
it. She and I came up through the ranks together. She was a researcher at Scandal, and then she wrote on Little Fires, and now this is her show, deservedly so. But that for me is like, oh, creating opportunity for other people to work and
Mm.
to pursue excellence. Like that feels special to me because, and that's when I don't feel, um, that's when it feels less like pressure and more like opportunity when I'm focused on like paying it forward.
Because it's
When
not
I'm
really
focused
about
on
you at
like,
that point, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. When I'm focused more on like me and what do people think of me and do people like me? And that can feel like pressure. And for me, that's a little paralyzing. But when I'm focused on like, what's the work we're putting out? What opportunities are we providing? How are we serving audiences and this industry? Then it feels less like pressure.
Gotcha. Scandal. We have to touch on it. It was obviously,
Yeah. Changed
this
my
massive
life.
change your life. Tell me about that moment that you realized you were the first Black female to lead this type of show and it was working. Like, was it like one of my friends was like, when white people started recognizing me, I knew shit was different. Like,
Yeah, that's why I have a whole chapter in my book called Black Famous, right? Because there is this moment where you go
yeah,
from like, oh, Black people know who I am
right.
to like, oh, everybody knows who I am. Oh, it's so
Yeah.
wild. I think
But is there a moment that something happened and you're like, oh, shit's different now?
it was like a wave. It was like a tsunami because we had this 1-2 punch, in between seasons 1 and 2, I filmed Django. And
Right.
so there was this crazy cultural moment of both of these like groundbreaking projects coming out into the world and really the world like all the like Scandal suddenly, even though people would say like, oh, part of the reason why they hadn't put a Black woman as the lead of a network drama in almost 40 years was because how do you sell to international territories with a
I
Black woman
hate
as your
that
lead,
shit.
right?
I hate it. Another conversation.
It's
Keep going.
insane. It's
Yeah.
insane because it's not
Yeah.
true. But coupling Scandal with Django, which was an
Yeah.
international juggernaut where we premiered in Paris and we premiered in London and we premiered in Berlin. It was like, oh, Scandal's undeniable because
Yep.
it's that girl from Django and it's this incredible show. So it became this tsunami of wildness. I think probably the day that I like opened up our pretend elevator so that Oprah Winfrey could walk into the offices of Olivia Pope and Associates, I was like, shit's changed.
It's
Something's
different
different.
now. It's different
Something's
now.
different. And I remember sitting with her and talking about the idea that my character in Django, Broomhilda von Shaft, that like in many ways, Olivia Pope was like her wildest dreams embodied, right? That,
Oh,
that
wow.
like
That's
she
interesting.
was a woman, Broomhilda von Shaft was on the run just to defend her marriage because she was still 3/5 of a human being, not
Hmm.
allowed to legally be married to the man she loved, like on a search for freedom and being able to love. And Olivia Pope was like, with the exception of the rooms where she was with the president, she was always the most powerful person in the room. And
Yeah.
even with him, often was the most powerful person in the room. She just, she was in love.
Let him have it.
So I think like that idea of like, walking in 4-inch Manolos and running through the woods barefoot, that kind of trajectory back and forth was really intense. And it kind of, it made me feel so lucky that I could have both, that I could
Yeah.
tell both stories.
It's a blessing to say the least. How did Little Fires Everywhere come about? I heard a story that like you called Reese or Reese called you and shared the material and it was just like, let's go.
Yeah, Reese had the book because she has all the books
Right.
because of her book club. And
It's a little,
she
little
had the
book
book
club,
in,
right? Little
yeah,
tiny
tiny
thing.
little book club.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
sent me the book. And I always say she made me a terrible mother for one weekend because I like wouldn't come out of my bathroom because I would just was like, I have to finish this book. It was so good. And I was so excited because it was at the end of Scandal and I didn't know what was going to be next. I knew I was going to do American Son, but I wasn't sure after that what would
Hmm.
happen. And so I was thrilled to have this opportunity and really excited to work with her because I have such deep respect for her. And I feel um, very aligned. Like we are very similar people in a lot of ways. And so it was really fun to be able to partner. One thing we feel very strongly about at Simpson Street is the power of partnership. We feel like collaboration leads to more creative courage and when you have the right partners. So Hello Sunshine was one of those partners and I'm really grateful that we got to make that show together.
Well, I'm not going to say what it is, but we're about to go down the road with you guys on something fun and
I
exciting.
know.
We
First of all,
got the
I've
green
been
light.
waiting forever because I love you and I love John. And I'm like, what? Like, we have to find something. And I think this project is so special and so needed.
Yeah, we're gonna. It's very aspirational, very inspiring. I love your passion for it, and obviously Johnny has a lot of passion for it as well. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and I heard you were like relentlessly telling him how much you liked it every time you're
Yeah.
like sending him
Yeah.
text and like,
In that school drop off, I would be like, yo. He's like, I
let's
know, I
do
know.
this. Um, real parenting, motherhood, relationships, family, like Michael Ealy, who's a really good friend of mine. Uh, when I found out I was having my first kid, he called me up and he was just like, I'm coming by your office. I want to grab lunch. I didn't know what he wanted to talk to me about. And we went to our deals at Disney at the time, went to the dining room and he sat down and he was like, fatherhood. And I was like, oh, we're
Mm,
not talking about projects. Okay. And he just kind of went in on
Michael's
like,
such a good guy.
we
Such a good
are,
guy.
we've been friends for almost 20 years.
Love
Um,
him.
but our friendship definitely elevated itself through grief, through the
Mm,
loss of our parents, and
mm,
just kind of coping with being in that club. He actually did the pod, and we talked about that.
mm,
But that was kind of the thing that really, after knowing each other for years, that kind of solidified a real like kind of brotherhood because we were living in our truth, which was no place anyone wants to be.
mm,
But he's one of those people in my life that kind of comes real with it. And you know him, like he brings the truth. He doesn't mix his
mm-hmm.
words. He's pretty, and he gave me a lot of insight. I'm curious, like for you being in the public eye, raising like Black kids of privilege, um, having two famous parents, like how do you navigate that? And is there like did you and Namdi like come up with like certain rules? I'm just curious, like, and you might not have an answer. And if you're not comfortable with the question, just let me know. But I'm curious,
Yeah.
like, because I know John and Chrissy, like, they want their kids to have every opportunity,
Yeah.
but they also need to, like, you know, teach their kids how to earn it and not expect
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I don't know if I have an answer for you. And so I do feel like it's hard for me to talk about it because um, I try to not share too much of their journey
Hmm.
publicly
Okay.
because I want them to be able to tell their own story one day.
I
So
respect that.
my kids are extraordinary. They're just extraordinary people. I
How
feel
old are they?
really so 18 and 10 and 8. And I feel so lucky that they chose me, that
Mm,
they like that I get to be their mom and I feel like I learn so much from them. Um, my favorite book on parenting, like the only real like parenting book that I recommend to people is this book called The Conscious Parent
okay.
by Shafali Sabari. And it's it's really about this idea that we have this mistaken paradigm in culture where we think that our job as adults is to make kids better and to
It's
like
not.
get them to be who we want them to be. And the opposite has been true for me of like my kids inspire me to be better for them.
Mm,
It's not about making them better so that I'm comfortable. It's really about like how can I evolve so that I can meet them where they are and not get in the way of the magnificent people that they are. Um,
I love that.
and yeah, it takes a lot of growth, because also each kid is different. Um, every kid is different. Every kid has different needs. Um,
Yeah.
but it feels like such a privilege to get to be walking in this life with them. And my desire is to keep being better so that I can keep meeting their needs. It's simple. It's just like, I remember the example in the book is like, you may think that you got to teach your kid to hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. My job is to help him hurry up. But really, maybe the task at hand is for you to learn to be more patient. Maybe that's the gift of the moment, right? It's not something that they need to do better. It's something that I need to do better. Um, so yeah, I don't know. The thing about being a parent with privilege, it's wild. It's different. It's obviously something. I don't have a blueprint for it because I don't come from privilege. Um, but the bottom line is you just want to raise like good humans,
No
you
doubt. No
know?
doubt. I think
Yeah.
for me, it's like kind of similar to what you're saying, and it's more simplistic verbiage, but I just want to be a guardrail, you know,
Mm,
and we're going in the direction that you're supposed to be going in. It's not because I've steered you in this direction or that direction. It's the direction that your instinct or your choices are
yeah.
pushing you
Yeah.
through. And my job is to just try to like protect you from either side, to make sure you don't go
I
too
love
far this
that.
way or too far that way, and support your
Yes.
vision and your journey.
So good. I love that because I think boundaries are important, right? But
Thousand
like
percent.
boundaries that are loving and encouraging and inspiring and yeah.
You know, like I would
Yeah.
love, and I named my children for the NBA and NFL draft. Like, like no doubt. Like, let's
So
go.
funny.
But the reality is, at 4 and 3, I mean, there's a lot of growth. Who knows? But I don't know. I've seen one of my kids running, and it doesn't look good. You know what I mean? And the other one, I don't know. So,
Oh, it's
but that's
so
okay, right?
funny.
That's the point.
Yeah,
It's like
they're gonna be who they are.
they're going to be who they
Yeah.
are, and you just, the job is to love them and be there for them, and
Yeah.
just lean into the process, and it's going to be what it's going to
Yeah.
be. There's so much I wanted to talk to you about, but what I want to do is just get into the fun stuff. You've just done so much. It's like
Well,
so
also we have
impressive.
so many similarities in our lives. It's
Yeah.
really profound to me. Like I'm so we have had such a similar journey.
It was when I read the book, I was like, holy shit. Like the next time I have a real opportunity and I didn't want to, I pulled you aside when I saw you at the studio the other day
Yeah.
with John and Chris, but like, I didn't want to like, obviously that was in the right place, but,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so how's the interview going so far? How am I doing?
So great. You're so good at this.
I'm doing okay. All right, good.
Yeah.
So to that note, you've done so many interviews. Is there a question that you've never been asked that you're kind of like, I wish they would ask me that?
No. I don't like need anybody to ask me anything. I don't need to talk any more than I already talk in the world. I want to
Fair enough.
listen more and appreciate what other people say.
I respect it. I respect it. What is the worst rumor that's ever been spread about you?
Honestly, I probably don't know.
You're not good at
That's
this, Kerry Washington. You're
no,
not
but
good at
but
this
I'm
fun.
I'm being honest. Like that's probably like I think often as a woman or as a person of color, the most racist or sexist thing that has been said about you or done, you don't even know because you weren't in the room. It was a decision that was made that you weren't even privy to. So I feel like that might be true with rumors as well, because I don't know a whole lot of rumors about myself, which means I'm not
Maybe
on the
there's just
right
no bad
text
rumors.
threads. No, there's rumors. There were rumors about Namdi and I in the beginning of our marriage that I'm so glad that we were like grounded before
Mm-hmm.
that stuff started. Um, but yeah, I can't really think of a rumor, a
I think
really
that's a
bad
great
rumor.
thing because I kind of feel a little differently. I feel like people talk shit about everyone at certain points in time and say shit
Yeah.
like, so
Mm.
I think maybe you're
Yeah,
just,
I'm sure there have been rumors, but maybe I'm also maybe I wouldn't process them well, so I ignore them. Maybe I have a block.
that's the defense mechanism. I
Yeah.
need to be better at that. Let's put it that way.
What's the
tell me
worst rumor you've ever heard about me?
I'm the interviewer, Kerry Washington. No. I mean, who knows? I don't know. I guess now I'm on the spot. I don't have an answer either. So touche.
Okay.
Touche. I'll answer that question when you interview me on your podcast.
Okay, perfect. I love it.
What's your playlist looking like right now? Are you like a Spotify playlist girl, or do you just play different like albums in your car and in your house? Like, I guess the question is, what are you listening to?
I do a little bit of both because I do like to give my kids free reign. Like we do a little bit of like take turns in the car where everybody gets to pick a song they want. And so we go back and forth from like, I mean, we're all over the place in the car because we can be like Sabrina Carpenter um, to, I mean, I'm trying to think of, my son is actually going through an Eminem phase, which is super
Nice.
interesting because he's 8. I'm like, how do you, what? Um, but he's
Eminem.
like a real hip hop kid. Like he's very much like he loves Nipsey. So we'll go from like, Olivia Rodrigo, Sabrina Carpenter to Nipsey to like we're kind of all over it. And then I'll be like Hamilton. So we're all over the place. But I do love an album. Lately I've been on like a Beyonce. I'm in a bit of a Beyonce phase, like pre-Lemonade
Oh, wow.
albums.
Okay. That's not a bad
Yeah.
place to be. Just
Yeah.
making some great music.
Yeah.
When your time is up on planet Earth, I'm getting
God.
dark
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
What would you like your tombstone to say?
I don't know if I want a tombstone because I think I want to be cremated.
I do too, and a lot of people say that. But in your cremation, in your transition
What do
ceremony,
I want
yeah,
maybe like something like she lived with heart, or she loved courageously, or she listened and loved.
something with love.
Yeah, something with love.
I do think it's an interesting question, right? Because we're so busy living as we should be, right? And you don't want to be living thinking about death. But I do think,
but also it can serve you to think about death.
I think your legacy, what you want it to be, can inspire to achieve that. So that was the purpose of the question. It was more in that vein as opposed to like being dark. What's your favorite curse word? And use it in a sentence, please.
I don't curse a lot. I used to curse a lot more, but Namdi doesn't curse at all. So I curse a lot less than I used to. But it would probably be fuck. And a sentence would be like, I like using fuck as like this fucking kid, like that kind of like, like this, yeah.
I said fuck to you in New York City at your book event in that wonderful lady's beautiful apartment. And I was like,
Beth's apartment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as it came out of my mouth, your face was like, and I was like, oh.
I know. I really don't, no judgment. I'm just not around a lot of curse words anymore. It's really interesting.
I mean, that's good environment to not be around curse words. I mean, I don't know how that works. My kid my teacher, kid's 4 years old in pre-K, my teacher's like, Jones said fucker today. And I was like, did you use it correctly?
Exactly.
Like, that's on
as
me.
long as you believed him. As long as you believed him.
It was effective? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But what would your inner circle say? Like, how would they describe you? Like Kerry is
hardworking.
That's evident.
Kerry is hardworking. Kerry is evolving. Kerry is doing her best.
I like that. And with that, I will say thank you so much for being my guest. You are awesome. You're one of my favorite people in Hollywood that I watch from afar because you do everything at such a high level and with such compassion.
Well, not from afar anymore. We're getting into it. We're going to cook some stuff up.
Yes. That's for sure. I'm very excited about that. But I just think you're awesome. And I'm really glad you said yes. Thank you for this conversation. And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, why not me? Why not you? Let's go. Appreciate you.
Let's go. Thank you.